Welcome to Understanding the Times Radio with Jan Markell, Radio for the Remnant, brought to you by Olive Tree Ministries. Today, Jan visits with Pastor Brandon Holthaus of Rock Harbor Church in Bakersfield, California. The globalists are trying to reset the world to form their new world order. How do we stand for righteousness amidst this growing darkness? Here is today's program.
The real principle you need to work with and understand is this. The people, the group that is behind all of what's happening, the lockdowns, the vaccines, the globalism, all this other stuff, want to destroy Western society. Okay? They want to destroy Western society, including America. America is the prize. They want to destroy Western society to be able to usher in what they want to bring into the world. And what they're wanting to bring into the world is globalism. Okay? That's the main understanding that you have to have in all of this. Okay? And so to really get a grasp of it, you have to first start there. What's the ultimate goal? Their ultimate goal is globalism. Now, you and I as prophecy students understand that that goal is mentioned in Scripture, that they will form a one world government. And eventually that one world government falls into the hands of the Antichrist and he takes over. And by the midpoint of the tribulation, he's in full control of the entire globe. So this is where it's going. So we know this as prophecy students. We know the end game. We know the end result of what they're wanting to do. So when you see things start happening in our world and it just looks insane, why are they doing this? This doesn't make sense. It's because it is a stair step to globalism.
Pastor Brandon, welcome back to the program.
Thanks for having me again.
Let's continue to set the stage, Brandon. Now, there are a few folks in the way of these one world agenda folks, and they would be capitalists, Christians, probably patriots. Anybody I'm missing there?
No, I think the whole paradigm of the Judeo-Christian system, which is part of Western society, even though it's waning in these later years, that's the one thing they have to destroy, is that Judeo-Christian ethic, morals, and principles in order to usher in their globalism. And they've been doing a very good job at it. So they have captured basically every sector of society in order to do this, whether it's the media, politics, education, obviously, entertainment industry, big tech, big corp. And basically, when you have all that, and along with the banking institutions, you have secured yourself in all the information avenues that could come our way. So that's why we shouldn't be shocked whether it's a politician, academia, or Hollywood giving us the same talking points for forming a global government. They all say the same thing.
Here's the one thing that the global government folks really, really need. They need chaos and they need a crisis. This is a clip of you, Brandon, from your recent conference presentation that I'm going to play.
And then cause as much chaos and crisis to introduce authoritarian control, to get order out of chaos. See, Satan is very smart, and he uses these tools in his hands to say, look, create enough chaos, people will be begging for somebody, a strong person, to come in and take order out of things. We've got to have order. So it's intentional that you see chaos, because then they can use that and say, well, you're right, it's chaotic. But in order for us to get control of this, we're going to ask you to give up your rights. So you just give up your rights, and we'll get this thing figured out. That's what they're going to do. And that's what they've been doing. Never let a crisis go to waste. Remember, Rahm Emanuel said that?
That's what we've been watching play out here for the last year and a half, soon going on 2 years. A virus comes along, instills fear in people. I have a suspicion that another crisis is on the horizon, and I want to ask you about that in just a moment. But the point is, what they're doing is they're getting folks to get nervous and anxious enough so that whoever will come along and offer order out of chaos will be honored. You and I know that's ultimately the Antichrist. Well, there are some Antichrist-esque people right now on the planet who are trying to do the same thing. Klaus Schwab, World Economic Forum, etc., priming the pump. But like you say, there has to be chaos and there has to be fear. And it's been a brilliant plan. It's been quite successful.
It sure has. And we call this in intelligence agencies and CIA type stuff, they call this a psychological operation, a psychops. That's exactly what it is. And obviously Satan is using it. But when you do a psychological operation, what they call it is a reaction solution technique. That's the technique. And that's what they've been perpetrating. So you cause a crisis, the people are going to have a reaction, and then you offer the solution.
Yes.
But in all the solutions is to take more freedoms from the individual for what? Peace and security.
That's right.
And that's a phrase we know from the Bible that Paul talks about in 1 Thessalonians 5, that when they say peace and safety or peace and security, then sudden destruction comes upon them. That's what they're using. Hey, we will give you peace and security, whether that's financial, health, chaos in the streets. We will give you peace and security, but you have to give us
That's right.
some of your liberty. And that's the game they're playing. And what we have watched, and this has been very upsetting, is watch people give up their liberties that people died for in our country in order to have their so-called life back.
In your lifetime, did you ever expect to see the rise of what we're watching? We're watching the rise of this end-time rebirth of the Babylonian system, the effort, again, Nimrod tried it many thousands of years ago, but here we're seeing the world's globalists try to perpetrate a new world order, but it's not God's new world order.
I think it caught a lot of us by surprise.
It did me.
Because we've always known about a global government that would form in the tribulation. But I think what caught us off guard a little bit was how much of the setup would happen during the church age.
During the church age.
And we're seeing an alarming amount of setup. We're having to readjust our perspective on there's a shadow being cast over the church age, and we're watching a lot of things we didn't expect to happen. So when I'm doing a conference talking about the political aspects of the Great Reset, I never dreamed I would have to go that deep into being able to try to explain what they're currently doing. Because a lot of us just said, man, that's going to be in the tribulation. We're not going to see a lot of that. But here we are.
God's giving us a heads up. I think He's also giving us a reminder that it's absolutely later than we could possibly imagine.
Is the Great Reset? Obviously, there's a couple things I want to mention. It is the World Economic Forum's name for it, the UN's name for their goal of creating the globalist system, a one world government, one world economy, one world religion. Pretty easy to understand at the base level, but that's what they're attempting. Well, how does it fit into Bible prophecy? Real simple. If you turn to Revelation 17 and 18, you will see the revived Babylonian system that plays itself out all through the tribulation. And then just to use this verse, Revelation 18:3, it says, for all the nations have drunk the wine of the wrath of her, the whore of Babylon, the religious aspect of her fornication. The kings of the earth, that would be the politicians, the leaders, the globalists, have committed fornication with her. And the merchants of the earth, the businessmen, big tech, big corp, have become rich through the abundance of her luxury. So there's the key aspect. There's the three-legged aspect of the Babylonian system. And so there's the system. The merchants of the world, they are big business. They are your Mark Zuckerbergs. They are your Amazon. They are all these big corporations and big tech that are involved in this. Blackstone, other kinds of major corporations, international corporations. The kings, obviously, rulers, politicians, global elites, they're all involved in this. And then the religious aspect is among us today. The religious aspect can be called lawlessness or 180ism. Now, why did I say that? Because lawlessness doesn't mean anarchy. It simply means that they're going to do everything opposite of what God says. God says this is right. They say this is wrong. It's 180ism. That's the system of lawlessness. So that's why you see wokeism about everything. You see the pushing of immorality. And then when you act like they want you to act, that cleanses you from all their sins. The way you atone in their system is bow a knee and proclaim that they have the truth and you have to submit to their values. That's how you get cleansed. If not, they cancel you. This is the way it goes in the Babylonian system. They have their own set of morality. They have their own high priest class. They have their own sacrifices. And they have their own infidels. That means you and I. We are the infidels in that system. But it is satanic.
I'm just wondering if the globalists have upped the ante and moved the date much closer to us than 2030. Do you get that impression?
I do, and the test case of where I'm getting my impression is the last 2 years.
Yes.
I think they saw with the pandemic how easy it was to maneuver this.
Okay.
And I think they used that as a template saying, well, let's just get everything accomplished because people are just taking it. People are just not fighting back. Oh, yeah, there's a few protests in here, but by and large, most people are not pushing back on this. So I think the last 2 years is the way we have to view this. Therefore, they have kicked this thing into high gear, and they are going for it. So I believe things are going to develop faster than what people think.
I think you're right, which is a good word of warning to my audience. And I think what we need to do, Brandon, is spend just a moment here. We've spent 3/4 of a program with some kind of bleak news, and I think we need to present the more encouraging angle to all of this. Of course, the thing that leaps out in my mind when it comes to the positive angle is all of this is a herald of his coming. All of this is reminding us that the tribulation is just over a fence post. You can almost hear the hoofbeats of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. And you and I believe in a pre-tribulation rapture. The church is removed before all of the terrible hell breaks loose. That is certainly forming. But you go ahead. I'd like you to encourage my audience as well, and I know you do that very well.
One of the things we have to keep in mind as prophecy students is we're going to have a bittersweet element to prophecy. Just like when John was told to swallow the small scroll in Revelation 10, it's bitter to watch all this happen to our world. It's horrible to watch. But at the same time, there's a sweetness about it. The sweetness is God is allowing this to head to the tribulation to get his son on the throne and to rule for 1,000 years.
Yes.
That's what this is all about. So we're getting closer to Jesus' ruling and reigning after the second coming. It also signals to us that we're getting closer to being taken away in the rapture. When I look at this, yeah, there's that bittersweet element, but you got to keep the sweetness in mind. We're closer to seeing the Lord. Then what we need to do from all of that with a bittersweet element is to understand this is supposed to prepare us. Prophecy is to prepare us, not scare us. And therefore, how do I prepare, Brandon? Well, if things are going to escalate with birth pains becoming closer in time and bigger, I need to prepare spiritually for that. Well, what do you mean? It means that I need to be about my Father's business. I need to be working and finishing well. I need to be able to cross that finish line and give it everything I had until we're taken home. It's not a time to surrender. It's not a time to sit on the spiritual couch and do nothing. It is time, and the urgency calls for us to get out, evangelize, disciple, be a watcher on the wall, and be the warning. Now, people will say, well, what's the point, Brandon? Is this going to end in the tribulation anyway? What's the point? Well, we have to think in terms of what the prophets were called to do. Many times the prophets, like Jeremiah, were called to do something, and God told Jeremiah, I want you to go tell them this, but they're not going to listen to you. But we got to tell them. Why? Because we have to give a warning for those maybe who will come to faith, but still a warning to put others who will refuse to listen, to put them on notice. God is gracious in getting these warnings out to people, and he knows whether they're going to hear or not. But that's not our job. Our job is to warn. So we have a job to do. We have a mission to complete. And so our mission's not complete until we're taken home. So the encouraging part of this is we were all called to such a time as this, so we need to get active. We need to be about what God wants us to do and finish well and fight the good fight of faith.
Very well said, Brandon. Brandon, another year is winding down here. And by the way, thank you for what you're doing. I just personally want to thank you from the remnant believers out in listener land. They are so appreciative that somebody would care that much to help them get plugged in. Our year is winding down. We got a couple of months left, but I'd like your take, and I'm down to about 3 minutes here. Your take on the current year. What, when it comes to things that the Bible predicted, which, of course, that's legions of things. So we're seeing things break in headlines on a daily basis that I think have end-time significance. But if you could pick 1 or 2 issues here for 2021 that have some biblical significance, what would they be?
Jan, I think the big takeaway from last year is the vaccine mandates.
I agree.
That was a watershed event that's continuing on, and we're watching authoritarian, totalitarian types of things happen from this, to where it's not your choice anymore that you can get vaccinated. It's a demand, and you will lose your job for it. And then we see scenes in Australia of a police state that's developed there. And can that police state develop here in America if they start forcing this on people and not taking religious exemptions or medical exemptions? What has this turned into? It has turned into a totalitarian play to capture our rights. And I think that is the biggest thing people need to realize. The other thing to realize is how many people were willing to give up their rights for mandates. And I'm not making the point of whether people should be vaccinated or not. I'm just saying it's wrong when a government tells you you have to do something and violate your own personal rights. That's the problem. And they're not going to stop. They're going to continue on, because after this, they're going to marry these mandates to the ability to travel, the ability to go state to state, and the ability to go into stores and be just a part of society. Yeah. And what's happening now is the unvaccinated are being considered the untouchables, the unclean. A two-tiered society is developing from this. And that's what should concern everybody, because the unvaccinated are looking to be persecuted and segregated from society because of their status.
Well, I couldn't agree with you more, Brandon. I didn't think I'd ever see the day where I'm witnessing some of the things that we're talking about. I think back a year and a half ago, it was let's have 15 days to slow the spread, and that turned into virtual tyranny. As you said, parts of Australia is completely under jackbooted thugs almost in that continent. Canada's getting close to that. Parts of Europe are getting close to complete tyranny over some of these mandates. Evil just seems to be running amok. I think what I want to do is I want to close the program just reading a couple of scriptures, because we've talked about evil for this whole hour, and what does God think of those that are coming up with the most incredibly evil schemes, these globalists, these one-worlders? I think he's got a message to them in Psalm 2. And there we read, "Why do the nations conspire and the peoples plot in vain? The kings of the earth set themselves, and the rulers take counsel together against the Lord and his anointed, saying, Let us burst their bonds asunder and cast their cords from us. He who sits in the heavens laughs. The Lord has them in derision. Then he will speak to them in his wrath and terrify them in his fury, saying, I have set my king on Zion, my holy hill." I hope that encouraged you, folks, because God is sitting in the heavens laughing at these evildoers, and he has a very ignominious future for them. Sad to say. I want to thank you for listening, and we will talk to you again next week.